Hello there, this is Angela Raspis, and welcome back to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt as though you're a bit of an imposter in the business world? Like you're not quite up to scratch? Like you're a bit of a fraud? Well, I know I certainly have in the past. And it's great news to hear from our gorgeous guest today, Tanya Geisler, that if you feel a similar way sometimes, you're in really good company. And what's more, if you suffer from this imposter complex, it actually means that you have high values of integrity and mastery. Because as Tanya shares with us, actual frauds never feel the imposter complex. So what's it all about? Well, it's that feeling, that insidious feeling of not quite being up to scratch, I guess is the one way of looking at it. And Tanya's sharing with us today the 12 lies of the imposter complex and 3 strategies that can help you overcome it. Because here's a really important thing to consider. We lack role models in this area. And that's just a fact of the time of life, because our mothers were not really doing this. They weren't starting their own businesses. There were rare exceptions, but in most instances, if you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you did not have a lot of women who were showing you the way forward. Our lives were very different back then. And so we are a breed, a whole new generation of trailblazers. And that's why this imposter complex can come up so often. So today's conversation is all about owning your own authority, learning how to trust yourself, how to take feedback that you receive, whether it's perceived or actively given, and to filter that through your own truth to find out what's actually going on for you. The strategies that we're sharing today will make an enormous difference in your levels of confidence. And if there's one thing I've seen for sure in all the time I've been doing this work in the world, it is our lack of confidence, our lack of self-belief, whether it be overt or under the surface, that often prevents us from expanding into these next chapter businesses with full authority. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation today. I know you'll find it enormously valuable, and I really look forward to your feedback. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Raspis, and I'm so delighted that you're here.
Yes, this is absolutely my next chapter, and what an incredible chapter it's been so far. The truth, of course, is that absolutely every single thing that I have done to date has led me to this point. As I say that, I can't help but look to the future and wonder what that next chapter is going to look like. But as I stand squarely, firmly, rootedly, happily in this place, I can look back, I can look behind and see how the work that I did in advertising, the work that I did with the patient education work that I did, that was actually the branch of our advertising that I was working within. It was really important to be part of a circle of care. That felt really important to me when I was doing that work. When I moved into a client side company, there was a medical device. That's just easiest to say, to explain it in that way. Part of my job was to sit in the company of elderly patients who were going through medical treatment, and I would sit and I would listen to their stories for hours and hours and hours, and I would listen, and I would advise sometimes, and I would reflect. And there was something really sacred about being with somebody in their experience of making their life better. So that's very oblique way of saying everything that I have done professionally has led me here. And then when I was the the very act of decision to step into coaching came from a experience that I had created called Board of Your Life, which is still a program I offer to this day. And people in my life were reflecting back all of these pieces in my life that were showing up when I was strongest, when I was happiest, when I was most on fire, when I was most passionate. And they would pull these strands of my previous experience and say, this is when you're most alive, is when you're in a circle of care with somebody. You're most alive when you are creating ideas. You're most alive when you're activating on those ideas. You're most alive when you are helping people reach their potential. You're most alive when you're at the front of the room pitching. So it was just this really beautiful experience of having people reflect back the things that I had sort of believed but I couldn't quite see for myself. And that's when I dove into coaching, did the training, did the certification, and I've been doing it for the last 10 years and continuing to evolve.
I love that idea of there's all these skills and these qualities and this contribution that you've made, but because you're so close to it, it's not always easy for us to actually be able to see our own brilliance, and that reflecting back, that inviting other people in to reflect back, and then you actually beginning to own those observations that they're making. What did that feel like when you were hearing how people saw the way that you turned up and showed up and operated in the world?
So part of it was curious because, well, one of the first things I learned about it was very conscious, right? So it wasn't a bunch of us sitting around, over pizza and discussing. It was like a really, and that's a lovely experience to be sure, lots of red wine. And but this was a very conscious, when have you seen me powerful? When have you seen me in flow? When have you seen me? So these were really specific directed questions. What I discovered, of course, was that the responses had a lot more to do with the person giving me the answer than me, which is, I want to be mindful of how I say this. We see in others that which we want to be able to see in ourselves. Okay?
Yep.
So that was really clear to me. So it was no surprise that my physician best friend who really wanted me to go into medicine could see me as a pharmacist, because she could see the way that helping people, healing people was very important, but she wanted to be able to see it from this very specific context. It's not a surprise that one of my dearest friends, who is a award-winning journalist here in Canada, wanted me to go into that because she was able to pick up on my curiosity, my love of telling a good story. So it was just fascinating to get those bits of feedback, and then also remember that we come at these opinions, at these perspectives from the lens of our life, right? So that was really telling. So I thought that was beautiful, and I received the gifts for what they were. They were acknowledging my curiosity, my love of healing, all of those pieces. So my job then was to take all of those bits of information and then run them through my own hoppers and feel for what was really true for me.
Yeah, that part there. That's really astute to recognize that, and I've heard that often in conversations that I've had, is that even, for example, when you're having a sales conversation, that the objections and the fears that come up are very much not about what it is that you are providing, but about what it is that's coming from the individual. They're not so much objecting to the offer; they're objecting to the fear that's coming up within them. So we often forget that feedback or that objections or that ideas that come from others are such a reflection of them. So being able to sift through that, to find those diamonds that resonated with you, and then to weave your own tapestry for the future. How long did that take? Was there a process that you feel that you went through as you started to have that next chapter illuminate and become alive for you, and the path to become clearer?
I love that question. I love that very much, because it makes me realize how much suffering I allowed myself to endure for the longest time. And then at what point I said, no, I think I'm done with that. So you just have, because for the longest time, I actually really thought that maybe there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Maybe I really just wasn't maybe I wasn't very ambitious. Maybe I wasn't very, when I was in advertising, I was doing very well. I was getting well paid. I was well liked. And I felt miserable. There's so many places of disconnect that just were palpable. And then I just kept thinking there must be something wrong with me, which I know is a familiar refrain. What it just led me to understand now, in the 15 years later, I can look back and say, well, there were just too many gaps. There were lots of things that I absolutely loved about it. So it was, for the longest time, I was seeking, I was searching, but I was searching in the wrong places. I was looking outside of myself, and the process of having people reflect back to me, it was a two-pronged process, right? It was the having people reflect back, and then me also sitting in the truth of what felt good and right and true for me. That was when things just shifted. I won't say shifted, I will say tilted, and I just poured myself into the coaching, just trusting deeply that this was the place that I needed to be, and recognizing as I stepped into it that there were lots of things about the industry that might not necessarily resonate with me, and I would need to build my business in a way that honored the truth of my desire to be front of room, honored my desire to have intimate safe spaces of care. So I knew that some of the models I was seeing out there weren't going to be mine. So that's what took a while, was to find my right blend of business build. I would say that was a little longer. Yeah.
I love that word, and I think that word trust is the biggest one. That ability to learn to trust ourselves. We've been, this is part of my whole theory about the next chapter, is that one of the biggest parts of it is leaning into that trust, is taking the small steps, listening to your intuition, deciding that actually this feels really good, and to be able to recognize that, and to recognize that, as you just so beautifully explained, that even as you were stepping into a new industry, not all parts of that industry were resonating with you. So giving yourself permission and trusting yourself to create the type of business that really, lit you up, and then finding your people from there. How does one build up that trust? How do you get connected to yourself in such a way that you can have the courage, or I guess to explore your convictions?
I have about 17 different answers for that. So I'm going to just grab the first two that show up. One is that as much as I trusted, I feel like this work was calling me. So I trusted in the call. That said, I recognized the way in which I had already followed the right path, and the right path led me to a place of dissonance. So I did, I got the promotions, I shook hands, I said the right things, I wore the right things, I pitched the right thing, I did everything right. And so then you get to this point and you go, and what is wrong here? There's something wrong. So when I tipped, poured myself into this, I recognized that there were lots of different ways, that there were lots of different rivulets that were possible. My job, the hardest part, was to not believe that there was a path, that there was somebody else's path that I was to follow. This took quite a while for me to get. But the trust came from, I'm just really feeling into the truth of this here. The trust came from saying I was going to do something and then actually following through. Saying I was going to do something and then actually following through, no matter how scary it was. The first blog post, the first product, the first time I asked for an increase in, an increase in my fee. The next time, asking for the interview, asking each of these things I said I was going to do, and to build my capacity to recognize that I not only could I do this, I was doing this. And so it was an incremental build. And that's just as true as it gets for me. I think too, but it's really important for me to say, the longer I looked for somebody else to point out a path for me, the longer I did suffer, the longer I did think, why can't somebody just hand me the blueprint, hand me the roadmap? Because there were very very frustrating days, and nights and afternoons and mornings as I kept trying to figure out if this was the right thing, is this the right thing, is this the right thing? And the answer was I never really knew until I was on the other side of taking that action step.
Oh my goodness, it is such a relief. And a recognition to hear you say that elusive. Well, there's got to be a map. There has to be a blueprint. There has to be the right way of doing things. That's what trips us up so often, doesn't it? When we, it's almost like we externalize our power to that respect. Is that I'm just going to do what you tell me to do, and then if it doesn't work, well, I'll just try another solution, another one, and another one. I think there's so much noise online, in particular, for women that are stepping into the entrepreneurial world, that we can get fooled into believing that there is some sort of silver bullet or magic potion, and it certainly seems to scream from the Facebook feed that there is, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I look at that with as much compassion as I can muster, because the truth of the matter is, we all had that. So we think, oh my gosh, I've done it. I have figured this out. I have cracked the code. So I want to share with everybody. I want to yell from the highest mountains. I have figured this thing out. So sister, you don't have to. But the truth, of course, is that worked for us because it worked for that person really, really, really well, because it came from their unique blend of experiences and probably research and probably all sorts of really great things. I just know that for the majority of people, we really need to find our way through. And if I can eliminate some of the suffering in and around the fumbling and bring people back, just like I know this is so important to bring people back to their own core, their own center, that helps making the decision-making process so much more clear when we understand that it's our voice that we need to be listening to. We haven't done this before. There has never been a time where we have created businesses. Our mothers weren't doing it. Our mothers' mothers weren't doing it. Our mothers' mothers' mothers weren't doing it. But they've got our back, and they are like shouting, "Go!" Like listen deeper, listen deeper, listen deeper. The answer is there.
That makes me take a big breath out. Listen deeper. The answer is there. And just coming back to what you were saying before about taking action, when you were taking action, saying, I'm going to do this, and doing that small thing and doing that small thing, as you did that, you were building your own trustworthiness, your own personal trust, and you build that muscle of confidence. There was, as you and I were speaking just before I hit record, I mentioned that I just finished reading a book, and in that book it talked about how the actions of confidence come first. The feeling of confidence comes later. So if we wait until we think we've got it all sorted out, and until we feel like we're fully qualified, or we've got, the whole shebang sorted before we take action, then we can't expect to feel confident. We need to take those actions first, which you've certainly shown. And I love the perspective, Tanya, with the compassion, looking at, the noise that is out there with that slant of compassion. That feels really good, because I truly believe, one of my beliefs in life is that everyone is doing the best they can. Yeah. Everyone is trying to do the right thing. I mean, of course, there's little tiny percentages perhaps of not the nicest people in the world out there, but overall, especially in our industries and environment, people are genuinely trying to help, and that's a belief I want to hold on to. So let's say that we've followed our heart, we've listened to our voice, we've taken those small steps, we're moving into the thing that is really, as you said so beautifully, calling us. You're called to this new direction, but then things do get in the way. And I know one of the many reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you was because of your deep experience around the concept of imposter complex and imposter syndrome, etc., etc. So I'd love to dive into that, because it certainly trips so many women up. Can you define it for us and help us understand the impact it has?
Absolutely. So I speak of it as the imposter complex. It was identified as the imposter phenomenon back in 1978 by clinical psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. But if we can go back even further, I've just discovered there's a whole body of work in and around the bioevolutionary construct of the reason we have this experience. In the ancient sages of India were calling it the fraud factor. I swear to you, like thousands of years ago, they were talking about this experience that happens on the precipice of our next expansion. It shows up. It shows up because we are about to grow beyond our edges, and it's a scary place. So from a bioevolutionary context, that wasn't safe. So there's all of these things show up in our experience. So when Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes were looking at it, they looked at it very specifically in the context of women, as it turns out, professional women. And what they noticed was that these women seemed to be completely incapable of internalizing any of their successes. So anytime they had a win, they believed that it was some combination of luck or fluke or timing or having fooled somebody. They were more than able, of course, to internalize their failures. Something bad happened, I screwed up. Something fantastic happened, the wind shifted. I don't know. It had nothing to do with me, though. So that's what they were looking at. They saw and they recognized this pretty much across the board. We now know that at least 70% of people at some point or another experience it. I cannot lobby hard enough for that number being incredibly, so much higher. But of course, I'm working with leaders and people who are very high functioning, high achieving. And that's the good news of the imposter complex, that if you experience it, it's because you're high functioning, you've got strong values of excellence and mastery and integrity. So this really matters to you, that you are doing things right. And the other piece of news that I have is that actual frauds don't feel like frauds. They don't. They don't have this experience. They've got something else. They've got the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the complete opposite, where people they have low capabilities but super high confidence, and this is the complete opposite of the imposter complex, which is people with high capabilities and low confidence in this particular realm. It's not to suggest that people that experience the imposter complex have low confidence right across the board. It shows up, though, on the precipice of some next great step. So this is why it really shows up for us. Look at the woman, look at the people we're speaking with. The next chapter, this is big. This is, at the edge. It's going to show up, and it's going to show up in ways like, it's just a matter of time before they find out that I'm not as capable as they thought I was. I feel badly for my clients when they give me money, because they're going to find out that I don't really know what I'm doing. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. That's the experience that they're having.
Oh, that is so good to hear, that identification, that the way that you've described it there, that if you're standing on the precipice of the next big thing, and that doesn't have to mean that you're going from stardom to superstardom. It could mean you're going from doing this thing to following your heart into the thing that is really calling you. That's very much when the imposter syndrome can kick in. I mean, the way that I hear it sometimes is in the very simple terms of people being hard on themselves. They're not good enough. One that comes up, that wording that comes up a lot. So that's very reassuring for anyone who's listening. If you're feeling that, and Tanya's going to describe it in great detail, but if you're feeling that, you're in very, very good company, and you have high integrity. That's very reassuring as well.
Yes, absolutely. The thing that I feel like I've said this a lot lately, because it's so up for me. I feel like all roads lead to the imposter complex. This is why I can't stop talking about it, because there are very few conversations or interviews that I read, or, books that comes up all the time. It's every day I get about 15 to 20 emails from people saying, hey, did you know the superstar chef feels this way? And hey, guess what my mom said? And, it's everywhere. It's so pervasive. And I feel like I've said this recently to you, maybe even to you. I think I said about, there was that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the father always had a way of bringing back every word in the English language back to Greek origins. And I swear I feel like I do this with the imposter complex, but I build on Clance and Imes' work. They saw 4 attributes of these women that they were working with. And I keep saying women. I want to be very clear that men absolutely experience it as well. But the studies that go back to, we're dealing mostly with women, and just the origin story of it. There were these 4 attributes that they saw. One being perfectionism. And the really tricky thing about the imposter complex is these attributes that show up are actually double binds. So they're these behavioral traits that somebody who feels like they are an imposter, they might be so terrified about being found out that they're going to work 2 to 3 times as hard as their peers. This is going to lead to over preparation, exhaustion. So I categorize this under perfectionism. Work, work, work. Keep sharpening the pencil, keep sharpening the pencil, keep sharpening the pencil. But the flip of this is that after working so hard, it can be interpreted as proof that you're not capable. I had to work so hard to make this happen, when for somebody else it's so much easier. Therefore, I must truly be the imposter.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Right.
That's deeply evil.
Right. Coming and going. Oh, honey, there's like 5 more. Like it's never ending. Leaky boundaries. Okay, this is the other place that I really see the imposter complex showing up. Clance and I were looking at this in the context of feeling of being a phony. So to avoid being found out, people who suffer from the imposter complex often offer up answers that they think people are seeking of them. I keep saying they. I could also say we. This isn't so much my thing, but I have many others. This just doesn't happen to be one of them, or at least maybe I've worked this one out of my system. But in order to sort of fit in, to belong, to not rock the boat, they can offer up answers they believe others are seeking, which then further entrenches that sense of phoniness. Because of this is one place that it's true. If you're offering up an opinion that's not your own, no wonder you're going to feel like a phony, right? So this is that kind of, again, the leaky boundaries. If we're not standing firm in our beliefs, then the imposter complex is going to get you. Okay?
And does that one relate back, as I'm hearing that one and recognizing it? Again, it's probably not quite one for me, but I've certainly been there. But I think I've managed to move it a little now. It's tied into people pleasing, into wanting that approval. And I know we're both fans of Brené Brown's work, and that difference between belonging and fitting in, and how you'll shapeshift to fit in. But if you're holding to your own truths, then you will eventually find the people that you truly belong with.
Exactly. Absolutely. So there's a slight variation on that one for me. And that's the third one, is actually use of charm, or the people pleasing. Like, I look at that as the people pleasing, where we are going to make good and sure that everyone around us likes us. This doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to agree with certain things, but we're definitely going to work a little bit harder and shine things up a little bit more. And here I'm going to own this one. We may rely heavily on our likability, but then here's the double bind. The praise we receive is going to feel hollow. And we're going to think that any opportunity we're given is just because they like us, not because we're capable, not because we forget that likability is actually, in some ways it's actually a strength, but we'll diminish that. We'll diminish that, which brings us to the next point, which is diminishment. And this is where we avoid displaying confidence. So someone dealing with imposter feelings is going to feel that if they display confidence in their intelligence or abilities, they might get rejected or challenged. And so not only are they going to dismiss any signs of confidence, we're going to convince ourselves that we are less than to avoid this rejection. We're going to turn on ourselves. That's going to feed into the lack of confidence. We're going to write weaker bios. We use language like, it's just, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. We really diminish ourselves. And that over time really wreaks havoc on our neural pathways. Once again, having us believe that we're imposters. We're not supposed to be there.
Don't take up the space. Don't stand out. As you talk, it makes me think of one that seems to come up a lot is people's fear of being seen. And in my own experience, I only really connected the dots of this when I was giving a presentation just a few weeks ago about something that happened in high school, and being on a stage and having a really unpleasant reaction from the audience. And I took that and internalized that experience as, don't stand out. If you stand out, in Australia, it's the tall tall poppy syndrome. I grew up in New Zealand, but in Australia,
Yeah.
the idea of if you stand out, we shall cut you down to size. Everyone needs to be down here type thing. And so that feeling of, diminishing yourself, I relate to very much. I'd just like to say, just this is a possible idea. I'm not saying it's the one, but maybe this is one we could have a look at, and that type of stuff. And you certainly do. I remember reading an article a while ago that I think it was from Tara Moore, who spoke about looking at your emails and actually taking out that diminishing language. I don't know if she used that expression, but taking out the just and other such words that soften, the strength of what we're putting forward. Really, really important one. That one. Thank you.
Absolutely. And it shows up, a friend of mine, I love Tara's article on that. And actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was an app that that would sync up to your mail system that would highlight those words. If I'm not mistaken, maybe I dreamt that. It's possible. I dream this stuff. But there's also the impact that that language can have. There's the impact that has on you, and there's the impact that has on your team, and the way it corrodes their faith in you. And so we have this way that there's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down in and around that. But this is one of the impacts definitely at a corporate level that I see all the time when I do work in corporate environments. This diminishment really invalidates the confidence that people feel in their leaders. And it does a number on us. The next two attributes that Clance and Imes didn't speak about dead on, but it was peppered throughout their work and peppered throughout everything, our understanding, of course, come back to comparison and procrastination. So these are, there's a book on procrastination. There's a book on comparison. There's so much to be said about both of these, but really it comes back to the same place. Why would I bother sticking my neck out when I'll never be able to live up to the work of somebody else? They are the real deal. I'm the imposter. I'm never going to be able to live up. That's the comparison piece. And then the procrastination piece is in and around once again, what's the point? I can go down this path and then anyway, there's so much to be said about that. But those are the 6 attributes that I feel all lead us back to the imposter complex. And we have at some point or another experienced perfectionism, or our leaky boundaries, or people pleasing, or diminishment, or we've suffered from procrastination and comparisons. These all come back.
They do, and they come up and down, I guess, depending on how you're traveling as well. You may be stronger in some areas. One day you may wake up and be feeling fabulous and on fire and certain and confident. And another day you could be feeling like crap, because I think...
Well, when I think about you on that stage, and I don't know the story, but if I could make some stuff up about it so that we could kind of keep it away from, if it's this area of, if it's a tender spot, I can just tell you that I see this a lot. First of all, this Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap, speaks about the sin of outshining, and I think that's a really important read for anybody who is doing the work of stepping into the next, into being seen, stepping into, to use my language, to step into your starring role, which doesn't necessarily mean stepping onto the stage, but in some cases, like the story, it can. And there's a pattern. We all have our own imposter complex related patterns that are unique to us. And it's important that we know what that pattern is. And I could just say a very typical pattern might be in and around getting an invitation to speak, feeling good about that invitation, but then all of a sudden that fear of failure shows up immediately, or the fear of success. That's a whole other show, but it's like huge, right? And what happens if I actually succeed? What happens if they fully see me, fully embrace me? What does that mean? Who do I have to be now? Who's going to disconnect from me when I am standing from a place of success? It's a big, big deal. But let's back up and say that we are terrified of failing, so we go down 2 paths. We either over-prepare, we burn the midnight oil. We are anxious and sleepless and restless and really just crunch, work ourselves to the point of near exhaustion. And then we either We either crumble because we're so exhausted and we have had ourselves convinced for such a long time that we are going to really bomb, that we bomb, which of course further entrenches our belief that we weren't worthy of that invitation in the first place. The other place we can go is we actually knock it out of the park, which often happens as well. And we feel good about that for about a nanosecond. And then we actually believe that all of that sleeplessness, all of that over preparation, all of that churn was the secret of our success. So now we have this belief that over preparation, that hard work, perfectionism is the reason we succeeded, even though we don't really allow ourselves to internalize that success. But that's what we have now carved that into our neural pathways, that this is the way to do it. Of course, the other option would have been that we procrastinate. We procrastinate and we don't get that report ready. We bail on creating the content. We don't practice. We just miss it all. And then we never show up. So those are the different ways that we can go down this imposter complex driven pattern. And it's really important that we recognize our own patterns so we can find the places that we can disrupt them ourselves.
That's that concept of self-awareness is a superpower, is something that I really believe in. And listening to what you're saying of recognizing your patterns and this whole imposter syndrome scenario, my goodness, it can start young. I'm hearing my daughter and that description that you had about the over preparing and, you know, the anxiety and the sleeplessness and the really pushing herself so hard. She has exams next week and she's always done very well in school, but her perception is very much the only reason I'm doing well is because I put in hours and hours and hours. And I can see how I can put you into that real trap because her, she's only 13, so a long way to go, but that inability to actually just loosen the grip because of that pattern, because of that cycle. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm definitely going to have another conversation around it. So, this is
what I actually, when we talk about next chapters, I really did I will say that this actually 13 was probably the age at which I noticed people coming to me. So it's very silly how this happens, but somebody on Facebook reached out to me who was a childhood friend, grade school friend. And she said, I'm so not surprised you're doing what you're doing because, back in grade school, I was seeking your counsel. I was so stressed about, X, Y, and Z. And what she actually reminded me, it's funny that you brought this up, was she said, you helped me to see at 13 that I was more than my grades.
I think I'm going to book a call for Charlotte and you. Take you back in time.
No, I'm not sure that I'm doing so well with my own girl, who's also experiencing that as well. But I really think this is really important for us to remember. We are more than our metrics. We are more than our numbers. We are more than the weight scale. We are more than the bank account. We are more than the readers, the blog. We are so much more than all of that. And we'll become absolutely hooked on these metrics. It's a game we can't win.
Well, I remember on that, recognizing that we are, if you look at ourselves from a 360 degrees and not just reducing ourselves to one set of results, that is something to aim for. That is something to remember. That is something to anchor yourself in. And I remember one of the things that we've spoken of in the past is how one of the lies of the imposter complex is that your self-doubt is proof of your inadequacy. Mm-hmm. And that I'd love you just to open up around that one and any of the other lies that we have time to look at today, because that one really, it rings so loudly. Self-doubt, I see as being one of the number one things that gets in the way of women actually pursuing. They may hear that inner voice, but actually taking the time to listen and to then move forward with it, because that self-doubt makes them think, I can't do it. I have no proof that I can make this happen. So could you talk to that one, darling?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, there's about 5 different places I want to go with this. Why do we not just stay on the phone and talk all day? Why do we not do that? Honestly,
I'll cancel everything. It's all good.
Right? Honestly. So actually, that's lie number 1. There are 12 lies of the imposter complex that over my many, 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 many years of experiencing it and studying it and Suffering from it. These are the lies that I hear the most often for myself. These are the lies I hear most often with my clients and the people that I've worked with and the reading that I've done. But lie number one is your self-doubt is proof of your inadequacy. So, this is huge, right? This is familiar to all of us who pride ourselves on intelligence and confidence. This is, what do I want to say about this? We think that when, it's what you said about that confidence comes from this ethereal place, but it actually comes from action. So we feel if we are experiencing self-doubt, then therefore we are less than. But the great news, of course, I'm going to remind you again, the fact that you're experiencing the imposter complex is proof that you're conscientious, proof that you're high functioning and have strong values of integrity and mastery. This actually keeps you on your edge and striving for excellence. And that's what makes you a good leader. This is what makes you the healer that you are. This is what brings compassion into the fold, which then again, further makes you that good leader, that team member, the colleague, the mentor, the coach. You can bring all of this with you into the fold. The truth, of course, is that self-doubt is proof of your humanity, not your inadequacy.
And it's that understanding that you're so not alone. Self-doubt cannot be eradicated. It's a natural part of who we are. It's just, I always think of the idea of not being fused with it. Because if it's right in your face, then it's hard to function. But if you give it space, allow it to exist, but as you said before, keep taking action anyway, it actually starts to fade back into the background. Very easy to say, sometimes harder to do. But it's that self-awareness again. And I loved how you described be aware of your patterns so that you can disrupt them. That's a great one here.
Well, I think the thing is, this is why I speak of this in very, really simple. These are lies, so we can recognize them for what they are when they show up. Just like we have, we have a lot more discernment around what fear is, and we recognize that, to imagine a path traveled without fear is, it's near impossible. We recognize the need to travel with it. It's the same with the imposter complex. It's going to show up. It's going to try to point out all the places that you're probably not driving fast enough. You're probably driving too slow. You're into the corner too much. You're into this, all of that. It gutter snipes. There's no doubt about that. But as long as you don't hand the steering wheel over to it, right? Like that's really the idea here. It actually does. It brings, it actually has a lot of wisdom to bring with it. And that really is in and around, your mastery. Yes, that is actually, at the end of the 12 lies of the imposter complex, that's the truth that it comes with. There is actually room for improvement. You know more than you think, and you'll never know it all. That's just truth.
Absolutely. And it's really breathing that in. I like to think, and again, not perfect because it's all, excuse me, on this this evolution, not a revolution, is that you can be in the place where you can truly acknowledge, accept and own your strengths and your power and your possibilities, whilst also sitting in a place of being committed to self-improvement.
Absolutely.
So that's the place where I think if we can aim to be in that space, and just on a personal note, I'm well-rounded. That's a good way of describing it. I am voluptuous, as my husband would say, and I can be in that place these days of usually accepting and actually being quite grateful for the strength and the durability of my body, but still in this place of wanting to take better care of it and improve its strength and nourish it well, but no longer like beating it up and hating it for what it naturally is. So that's the space that I think I would love to encourage people to move to with the insights that you're sharing. And my goodness, we've only got to the first one. Do we have time to do a quick run through the other 11?
Sure. So the second lie, successful people don't experience this. Okay, so this is the piece where you brought this in. It's so good to know we're not alone. We have this belief, though, that people, we look at the internet, how old do I sound? We look at Instagram, we look at the interwebs, we look at Facebook, and we think that, these people have it together. This is, of course, the comparison piece. But This is just colluding with the first lie and trying to further entrench us in this belief about your inadequacy. This is why, though, we feel such sweet relief when we hear that, Chris Martin, Neil Gaiman, Tina Fey, Meryl Streep has said, every time I do a movie, I think this is the one that the time they find out that I can't act. And she's been nominated for an Oscar 18 times. It is that traveling companion. The more you do, the more places you succeed, the more opportunities it's going to take to point out all that you still don't know. All the places that you're not living up to. It's incredibly high standards. The trick is not to allow it to shut you down. You're not alone. You are in exquisite company. Okay?
Absolutely.
Third lie, you are all or nothing. So the imposter complex speaks in competence extremities. You are, if you're not an absolute success, you're a raging failure. They're at both ends of this are traps. Knowing everything, knowing nothing, complete success, complete failure. It's irrational. And the truth is always closer to the best case than it is the worst case scenario. I just want you to look to your life to recognize that is true. And when it speaks in such competence extremities, just recognize this is the hallmark of the imposter complex. It doesn't give you any room for nuance. And we know that life happens in the in-betweens. So that's your job, is to challenge the imposter complex when it shows up like that with one word. And that word is really, really complete success, raging failure. Like, we know intellectually this makes no sense, but in this moment, when the stakes feel so high, it's hard to separate from that. But this is the edge that we're asking you to step into.
That's great to hear. I mean, it's recognition. So when that absolute, 100% or zero, when you feel that kicking in, it's that recognition. It's recognizing that thought again. That's power. Yeah. Recognition is power.
Absolutely. This is the whole, this is recognizing that you have choice too. This is if I can ever leave somebody with that, it's like, you have a choice. You have a choice to listen, or you have a choice to find another way, and I always will vote for you finding another way, and allowing some of that introspection. What does feel true for me? When you're in that place, though, you'll hear the lie for what it is. The fourth lie is that you have nothing useful to say. Again, lots of, big, bold language, nothing useful to say, or valid, or original, or enduring. And of course, this is the one that often trips us up. People whose work is in and around communicating. When we believe this, we say nothing. We don't communicate with our peers, our colleagues, our readers. We pass up opportunities to share our message. We don't collaborate. We miss out on growth. We miss out on learning, and we miss out on connection. Whew, that brings me such sadness. And of course, the truth is, there is a distinct possibility that what you are speaking about has been said before, but I guarantee no one is going to be saying it in the way that you are, from your unique blend of experiences and aptitudes and talents and passion and vigor. Your way is the way.
Because there's such a high cost to believing that lie and not sharing the message that someone may absolutely need to hear. Even your work in the world, Tanya, if you decided that those two colleagues back in the 70s had said it all, we'd be missing your voice. So such an important one.
Sing it, sister.
Hey!
Line number 5. So yeah, this is like the imposter complex pays you hush money on this one here. So you must not tell anyone about this.
It's just between you and me.
Just between you and me. Yeah, if you don't tell anyone, then maybe they're not going to think, maybe she doesn't deserve to be here. So why would we give them ideas? Speaking your fears, obviously, is just going to draw attention. And besides, what they don't know, it's not going to hurt anyone. But the converse is far likely to be more true and more productive. By naming this experience, you're doing what Brene Brown says, you're speaking the shame. And this brings compassion into the fold and helps others it encourages others. So, and the truth, of course, is, you are not alone. So you're looking around and you think that everybody else is so self-assured. But when you actually speak into I'm excited to be doing this and nervous because it matters. You can actually start to feel the relief spread across the space where people are so relieved that you have named it, and that is your job, is to name it. But of course, everything is a contradiction. So line number 6 is, you must tell everyone about this. This is where we have to point out the error in people, the error of our ways. When we get some praise, we have to dismiss it. We have to let everybody know that we're the imposter in the room. We have to say, I don't belong here. We have to make sure that everybody knows so that nobody is blindsided by your imposterhood. There's so much discernment that is needed as we approach this piece here, because there is a vulnerability paradox that can show up. We can, first we need to be really clear and concise about what's actually happening for us, and then we need to share only as much as we need to share. We don't need to go overboard, because there is a false sense of connection that's trying to be fostered here that has tipped too far. So I can say a lot more about that, but we just need our own level of discernment as it relates to how much we want to share and how much we want to self-manage. You're not alone. You're an exquisite company. We all struggle with this piece here, but you belong here, and so do I. That's the truth of this.
There was a beautiful quote, and I know I've referenced Brené a few times. I've got a bit of a girl crush happening. She's definitely a way shower for me. And the quote that I recall is, "Don't puff up, don't shrink, just stand in your sacred ground. Stand your sacred ground." And I think that actually relates to those 2 points of don't tell everyone and don't tell no one. Just tell and share to the people that are right for you, to the people that are in your audience, to the people that matter to you, because your message matters. So it's that anchoring. Oh, this is juicy. Thank you, darling.
Yeah. Well, what I love about that as you reflect that, this is, there's a way to model this. There's a way to model this, and I think what you resonate so beautifully with Brené in her work is she is doing that. She's standing in sacred ground. She is speaking. She's speaking with shame. She's speaking the places she has been, and we believe her because she is she's so passionate. She's so. She's in it, right? She is in it, and I'm certain that we can go down another whole rabbit hole there. But this is, she is speaking, she is teaching from the places of her own suffering. She is now teaching what she is in the process of healing for herself. Bishop T.D. Jakes said, "Your ministry is where your misery has been," right? And I feel like that is the truth of this. That's why this is the work that I'm doing. This is where my misery has been. It has been with me for a very long time, and I'm finding a way to work with it. I'm finding a way to overcome it, and that's why I feel so deeply passionate about this work, because it has been where my misery has been, to be certain. Yeah,
I relate to that one entirely. That's what I feel powers my work in the world as well. Absolutely. Your ministry is where your misery has been.
Yeah.
Great quote. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I add to that, I say, and also your joy. We forget that we can also minister from our places of great joy. Line number 7. Okay, ready for this one? You're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. So finally, the imposter complex is actually giving us a tiny bit of slack. It's giving us a bit of wiggle room. It's pointing to the fact that you may be ready one day, that day's just not today. So maybe when you get the next degree or put another 10 years under your belt or won the award or, right? So it's going to happen, kid, just not today. So it's two things you need to remember, right? As you sit down to write the book or step up to the microphone to deliver that which the words that are going to change everything, where you're going to minister where your misery has been, think about how everything you have ever made and delivered and sold and created and drafted and survived and healed and done is coming together right here and now for this very purpose, for your next chapter, for this moment. And no one was ever fully ready for anything. The pencil is never going to be sharp enough. Do it. You are ready enough.
And that's that you are enough, and we'll just put in the word with a little asterisk, ready enough now. And that comes back full circle again, doesn't it? So you're ready right now. Take the step, take the step, take the step. The trust, the competence, the confidence all builds as you take the step.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Line number 8, you'll never be able to pull that off again. So you did something fabulous, right? You got noticed. You had the best, consulting call of your entire life. The big name client said yes to you, but apparently the statute of limitations on your capacity to do more fabulous things all of a sudden just kicked into high gear, and your talents and skills and knowledge and abilities are finite. And you're certain you're going to become the one-hit wonder, so why even bother? The success that you enjoyed in that moment was the result of the skills and will that you brought to the table in you doing, in you being in action. And it's possible that the stars were aligned. And it'll be once again and again and again, as long as you continue to bring your skills and will to the table. The one-hit wonder gave into the imposter complex. That's what happened.
That explains a lot of the music that I used to listen to in the 80s.
How do you top that? I mean, Liz Gilbert talks about this, in her TED Talk, was it TEDx? I'm not sure, where she was talking about the muse, and she was talking about, how do you follow up? Eat, pray, love. How do you do that? And I actually have a lot of people come to me saying, I feel like this thing that I have within me is a masterpiece, but I'm actually afraid that I don't know how I'm going to be able to follow it up. And I swear to God, that just gives me a headache. And my head wants to explode when I hear that, because it's like, you're telling me you're sitting on top of a masterpiece and you're afraid to reveal it to the world because you're not sure how to follow it up. No. So I'm a lot more compassionate when that actually shows up. But that's what's actually going on inside. No, we need your masterpiece. Please, please, please. Keep showing up. Keep bringing your skills and will. It's going to happen. Okay, line number 9, it's just a matter of time before this all crumbles beneath you. So this one shows up when we are actually appreciating that which we have created. We are, for a nanosecond, resting on the laurels of our success. We actually feel some level of competence, and then immediately we feel like we have let our guard down. We have somehow managed to curse ourselves with our mini celebration. Most assuredly, the other shoe's about to drop. We stop breathing. We stop appreciating. We panic, and we lay low, exactly where the imposter complex likes us to be, low, not in action. Right now, we're not in action. But I wonder, how good will you allow this all to be? It's up to you to decide. What if the other shoe wasn't about to drop? That's what I ask.
Yeah, what if it was just something that you could actually luxuriate in, that you could roll around in with joy? Mm-hmm. What if?
What if?
Good question.
What if? We're terrified to celebrate. We're terrified of celebrating. We're terrified. It's a huge part of the process that I walk people through in the step and do star and roll work, because it is actually, celebration. There's, I have people meeting the critics, which is like hard work and bolstering authority thesis and doing work. And man, I tell you, the one place that people resist the absolute most is in the celebration. We have so much baggage in and around what is worthy of celebration, who gets to celebrate, what it looks like, how it's perceived. We have so much judgment about it. But it's, that is so our edge, to be sure. Line number 10 is you can't trust the praise of others. So it also sounds like they're just being nice, right? So this comes back to that use of charm, which brings us also back around to line number 6. We better tell everyone about this. Set the record straight. Assure them of the error of their ways. Point out the flaws in our work, our sloppiness, missed opportunities. Call ourselves out for the imposter just because we got they're just being nice. We have to set the record straight. But I urge you to just for a moment hold the possibility that they are really and truly reflecting back what they see, competent, capable, smart you with so much to offer. Can you accept their acknowledgement as the gift that it was intended to be, is the question. So I then dare to believe someone when they tell you how remarkable you truly are, and then say the 2 words feared most by the imposter complex. Thank you. Thank you. Such a hard time with that. Thank you.
I love that idea of accepting the gift as it was supposed to be received. Because if somebody gives you a compliment or a piece of positive feedback, it is a gift. And if you want to put it in that respect, it's like, tossing or knocking the gift out of their hands when you actually refuse to receive it. And I think I've heard or read of you speaking that, I mean, this is quite, even though men do have the imposter syndrome or complex, it's quite a female thing to downplay our achievements and to have this feeling that, well, anyone could do it. Or as you said, externalize it. It was luck, or, well, this old thing. I have a couple of friends I think of who have, amazing abilities in certain areas, and just taking it away from the business for a moment. There's a particular friend who just has the knack of interior design. Her house looks amazing. She takes great pleasure in creating it, and it's a skill that is not in my skill set, and I'm really conscious when I'm visiting her home how beautiful and welcoming and warm it feels. Yet when you compliment her on that fact, it's like, oh, no, it's just this, and it's no big deal. And it's not that she is pretending to be coy. She genuinely doesn't recognize that it is an absolute gift, a skill that she has. And that's and you see that a lot. And I know I've done it myself, not in interior decorating, but in other areas where you'll downplay and not receive that appreciation with your own gratitude. I think we need to practice that one, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think that there's something in and around, the innate skill that your friend has. If we don't struggle for it, if we don't fight with it, if we don't wrestle with it, it doesn't feel important. It doesn't feel valuable. It doesn't feel worthy, right? Yeah. So I think that that's absolutely, some of the places, I think there's so much intelligence in ease, and what we resist it because it's not supposed to be easy. If it's easy, it can't be important. If there's so much conditioning in and around that. And this is not quite the same. And it is, I think about a woman I was speaking with, an engineer. She was speaking about somebody on her team, and she was speaking about working in very close proximity with her team, and she was saying, I would believe my team. I would trust them with my life. And in fact, I do. I trust them with my life on a daily basis. Like there are lots of things that can happen in the lab, but I trust them with my life. Yet I can't trust their praise. I can't. I just can't. I just that's such a. It's such a visceral place of wounding. And I think the truth of the matter is, back to the tall poppy syndrome, we have had the experience of being cut down, and probably more painfully, we have had the experience of doing it ourselves.
Yes. And so that, because we've done it, we then can transfer that and assume that other people are doing it too.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that one.
Yeah. So our work is to put our own scissors down. And if we really want to believe in a kinder, gentler world that we can imagine around us, it does actually require us to be really brave and courageous and more wholehearted, in our approach to our sisters.
Yeah, that's very true. And I love the idea of a part of my purpose is to build community, very much to build community where people can feel safe and supported. They can ask the questions that they may not feel safe to ask, perhaps in other quarters, to actually show that vulnerability and ask for help, because it's so important. This journey can be really scary. It's brought up something else as you were talking, that women who are standing on that edge of their next chapter could very much fall into this trap from the perspective that I don't think my skills are going to be of value. And I found so many next chapters are built on skinned knees and your life experience. And to discount that because you're not sure that it's really that valuable, that can just stop you from actually taking that step. Because if you have been praised for it, if you are attracted to it, but you don't trust that praise, that can really, it can trap you, keep you absolutely, stuck and inert. So recognizing and owning, I love, I know an expression that you use is owning your authority. And recognize that in this area you have skill. You bring skill, experience, passion, and a desire to contribute. That's definitely rings of authority and hope for others. Thank
you. Yes, thank you. Line number 11, you're going to have to fake it till you make it. Okay. So here's this is, this has gotten us out of a lot of hot water, and it's got us into a lot of hot water. It is a very often cited directive, and it has a very well-intended strategy to circumvent the imposter complex. And I completely, deeply understand and respect the science underneath playing the game, taking powerful stances until they're baked right into our confidence. I also take a strong stance for this, just colluding with our already exacerbated sense of imposterhood, rooting into what is actually true, actually meaningful, and actually authentic about those qualifications, those abilities, and your capacity is far more enduring. You don't have to fake a thing. You don't have to fake a thing. When you come from that place, of truth, and what is it that you said, that Brene said, the sacred, standing on sacred ground?
Yeah, don't puff up, don't shrink, stay in your sacred ground. Stand your sacred ground.
Right? Just like stand and know and be. The thing is, what is magnetic about you has so much more, and this is a little off, the script of the lies, but this is what needs to be said in this moment. It is you. You are what is magnetic. Your content is probably extremely powerful and deep and profound, but it's you that are magnetizing people to you and to your message and to your work. Faking anything is simply exacerbating your sense of imposterhood. That's not what you're here to do. What you're here to do is to fill more of that U-shaped space in the universe.
Oh, that just triggers a beautiful memory. There's a friend of mine who's in the same fellowship that I'm in, and she stands and says, she's in her mid-50s, and stands and says, I've come to realize over the years that the universe has created a Susan-shaped hole, and it's my job to fit that hole. Nobody else's. It's nobody else's job to fit the Susan-shaped space in the universe, and it's not my job to try and fit into anybody else's space. This is my space, and I'm going to stand in it and fill it up. And it's just, I love hearing her speak. It just makes me feel just so settled, so absolutely settled. She speaks such truth. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. I had heard that in the context of, there's a piece that was written, and I've written about it fairly recently. Actually, we lost, or we haven't, oh my gosh, I shouldn't say that. We are in the process of losing a beloved icon here in Canada, Gord Downey of a band called The Tragically Hip, and they just had their farewell concert. And it was just, like the jokes on social media were, if you need to reach Canada, you're going to get our voicemail because we are all watching this concert. It was a beautiful night. But there was this piece on collective grief after we lost Bowie and after we lost Prince. And the writer had said, this is the experience. We see these people that are filling out the shape that the universe has carved out for them. And we just feel this sense of wonder and awe. And that's really what I feel like we're all working towards, is to, not fill Susan's shape, fill our own. And so when, so maybe that's where the powerful stances come from. But this isn't about faking. This isn't about trying on somebody else's coat to have it fit differently. This is really about standing in what we know and our abilities, and what is true, and what we know so very, very deeply, and what we can, back to this, trust in.
And do you think, Tanya, this has got a lot to do with defining success, in very much inverted commas there, because it's got so many layers to it, but defining your version of success that is very much related back to your values, what are important to you. Not when you're talking about not putting on someone else's coat. I think sometimes that we can be chasing a definition of success or another version that we've seen somebody else showing online or out in the world, and that's when the imposter complex can quite often get very loud, when we are actually pursuing something that isn't truly meant for us.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's where I've suffered the greatest, was in those following other people's paths, believing that this was intended to be my path, when of course it wasn't. It was not. Those are my footprints in there. That's not what this life is about for me. This life is about, what does my path look like? Where do I get to at the other end? And having a deep a newish sense of what success means to me. That's always evolving. And I do think that it continues to be, I come up against the imposter complex on the daily because I'm taking a step further and a step further and a step further. And again, if it's true that there is a bioevolutionary context to it, then, no wonder we keep coming up against it time and time and time again. But once we know the lies for what they are, and then, employ the 3 strategies that I know that everybody has to use to overcome it, then, we every day it's a game of whack-a-mole. Amy Cuddy speaks of the game of whack-a-mole that we can actually win. So I'll just say the very last one is asking for help is for suckers. And this sounds like only the weak seek help. So many of the reasons, so many of the lies of the imposter complex have to do with being alone and isolated. That's because that's where we are most vulnerable and least impactful. It counts on us feeling alone and isolated, keeping us singled out with our head down. No one needs to do this alone. In fact, no one should, which is why your work is so important, Angela. Asking for help means that you're serious about your success. I just need you to know that, the people listening, your people want you to succeed. Let them help you.
Yes, isolation, everything that happens in isolation, I think the volume gets turned up if it's a negative thing, or it gets turned down if it's a positive thing. I'm a great believer in the power of a circle and in the power of being surrounded by people who are also on a journey. So yeah, absolutely. And asking for that help. We're not suggesting that you got to ask for the blueprint. But it's recognizing where there's gaps in your knowledge, for example, that you need to close so that you can move forward. Yeah, asking for help is definitely strong. It's not weak at all.
Yeah. And then that piece of truth that I've already shared with you. It does come with one piece of truth, and that is that there is room for improvement and there's room for more. And that's actually really good news because, if you're doing the work that is the work of your heart, the work of your soul, then you actually love doing this, and it is worth it. Every day that you have come up and overcome that next edge, this is how we continue to build our authority. And I'll just leave with this. There are 3 strategies that every single person that myself, Angela, like every single person that you have met that has come up against it. In fact, you've done it. You who's listening, you've done this, whether you've had the words for it or not. You have had to meet the critics. There are 3 through lines, or I'll just say with that, there are 3 through lines that pretty much everybody does. One is the imposter complex tries to set us up for failure, and it wants to keep us out of action, as I've been saying and saying and saying. So we need to meet the critics head on. We need to look at the internal ones, and we need to look at the external ones. We need to look at our inner critic work about, discerning fact from fiction. Is this a realistic objection? Is this an inner critic? We need to actually be very granular and specific about what's actually happening here. What are the reasons that you can't have the thing that you say that you want to have? So we need to look at that. And we need to be very discerning about what's real, what's not, and not give in to that intimidation. And also, there are actual critics that show up that remind us, but the imposter complex is a very internal construct. And then the second area is, so we have to meet the critics. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it has us not trusting our capacity. So the strategy is to show yourself what you can do. So I speak about bolstering your authority thesis. And we have to look at what we know to be true on an internal basis first before we start looking at externally. So I was telling you about that Board of Your Life experience. I was only able to receive all that I was being given because I had done some internal work, because I was looking at the areas that I had already enjoyed some success. And then I was able to receive from what other people were saying, because if we get too hooked, like Tara Moore speaks about on the praise and the criticism, then we start operating from a place that isn't rooted and centered. And then the final place is that once again, it wants to keep us isolated. It wants to keep us on our own. So the strategy is to get social. So once we are, if we are meeting the critics on the regular, if we are trusting into our capacity by building our authority thesis, if we are gathering the right people around us who can keep us going forward, who can be our shoulder when we're feeling weaker, who are there to celebrate with us when we have overcome, who are there to remind us of our tells, who are there to hold with us the lies of the imposter complex that we keep coming up against, then we have a good chance of beating this thing over and over and over again every time we meet that next edge.
Oh, that is so good to know that when we listen to all of those lies that you've taken us through, and I mean, I could recognize a part of my experience in every one of those pieces you put forward, but to hear the solutions and the strategies are actually, they're simple, but they're powerful. And they're multi-layered. It's not as though I can go tick those 3 boxes. There you go. I'm cured for life.
Right.
It's really an ongoing journey, but it's making that journey easier. It's making that journey less arduous when you have those 3 strategies that you're practicing. So it's really about, as we talked to before, it's about that self-awareness piece. And if you can keep these 3 strategies, in your hip pocket and actively practice them, then there's a darn good chance that you will get your work and your purpose out into the world and feel bloody good about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, there is so much that we've talked about, and as you touched on, we could keep going for another couple of hours, and I do have a strong feeling that this conversation will continue another time. But what you've shared with us today it's been profound, and I really, even for anyone who's listening, this is the sort of conversation that is worth listening to a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. You'll hear more pieces the more that you listen to it. And if people want to take the exploration of the complex deeper, how do we find you? Where do you like to play online?
So I am active on, I'm loving Instagram so much lately. So I'm at Tanya Geisler. I'm at Tanya Geisler Coaching on Facebook, and I'm at Tanya Geisler on Twitter. I do have I have an Imposter Complex 101 primer, which is 4 videos that will take you deeper into this content. And they're actually, one of the things I love about it, there is something called the Imposter Complex scale. And it's a neat tool to see just how bad you got it. So that's a fun thing to do. I love the Imposter Complex primer. I think that's a really great tool. And but those are the places you can find me. And sorry, I should just say that my website is tanyageisler.com.
And I'll make sure that those links specifically are in the show notes, so anyone cruising through can click straight through and find out how bad they got it. And then, of course, those are just bringing them back around to those strategies so that they can start alleviating their pain, our collective pain, because we're all experiencing it. I think just having the conversations about it and giving people the language to identify what's happening and to recognize that it's part of a bigger picture. So they're not alone at all. I think that's hugely reassuring and empowering, because we've now got the tools and the knowledge to actually make a difference, to change.
Maybe so. Yes.
Thank you, my lovely, lovely friend. I feel very privileged to have been able to share your insights with my audience today. So thank you so much for fitting it in.
My absolute delight. Thank you for having me. I'm just, I love what you're up to. I love your community. It's beautiful work you're up to. And I think that this is such a huge key to overcoming it again and again is that community piece, to be certain. So thank you for your work.
You're welcome. Kindred spirits indeed. Mm-hmm. And for you who's listening right now, who stayed with us throughout this whole conversation, just pause and really breathe in those doubts that you've been having, those things that have been tripping you up. You know what they are now. You can hear them, you can feel them, you identify with what it is that we've been discussing. And that self-awareness is now going to allow you to make changes. And those strategies that have been shared with you, in particular, the one that I'd like to reiterate for you today is the community part. There is a Next Chapter community that does live on Facebook, and it is packed to the rafters with women just like you who are creating that courage and that self-belief to step into that idea, that vision, that dream you've got, that new thing that's calling you in your own next chapter. And I would love to be a part of your support network by inviting you to come along and join us. If you just search on Facebook for Your Next Chapter, you'll find us, and I'll welcome you in with open arms. So thanks again for investing your time, and have a lovely day. I'll be back speaking with you again really soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspas.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.